I had a friend visiting this past week, and she's a mama of a 3-year-old, and we've talked so much about motherhood. We've known each other for 20 years, and so it was really beautiful to see each other and just talk about seeing each other through these different stages. And she said something to me, she reflected something back to me, and it really struck me. So I'm going to share that with you. But first, I'd love to welcome you here. My name is Dr. Piper Grant. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I am the founder of Born into Motherhood, and I am a mama of 2. Welcome to the space that I hope offers reprieve, support, and validation through all the stages of motherhood. And here's what my friend said to me. She reflected back how crazy it was to see me now as a mother of older children. Here she is still with a 3-year-old, and she was like, it's wild. I think of you as having young kids, but now your kids are older. And it made us open this conversation talking about how, as mothers, we have so many different transitions, like back to back to back to back, and yet very rarely do we acknowledge them. We acknowledge all of the developmental milestones of our children, but like as mothers, we are writing those developmental milestones with them. And then if you've got multiple kids, you're writing multiple developmental milestones at the same time. And in this conversation, we were talking about not only how many transitions we go through, but like how difficult that can be. And my friend was really vulnerable in sharing with me how at times it was like hard for her to go through all of these transitions. And we started breaking it down, and it's like, yeah, because as our children hit these different developmental milestones, we are having to like also transition through that, but we don't necessarily get our own acknowledgement or our own time or our own space to make sense of that even for ourselves. And it just really had me thinking, like, how as mothers do we weather these different transitions? How as moms can we acknowledge all of these different transitions? And what's the impact on that? Because as my friend was explaining, she was like, it was hard for her to adapt to all these different transitions. And it made me think like, yeah, man, if you are like type A, if you like schedules, if you like to have predictability in your life, if you need predictability for safety, your children are constantly evolving and changing, and therefore you are constantly having to adapt to that. And that is tiring for many people, and that can be really difficult. And that weathers on us. And so I started thinking, okay, what are the impacts of that on maternal mental health? Because obviously as a therapist, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, valid point. Like I was writing down a note. I was like, babe, I need to write this down. Hold on. Like, let me come back to this. And I really see how that can contribute to maternal burnout and depletion. I can see how that can contribute to overwhelm. I can see how that can contribute to anxiety. I can see how that can actually trigger like trauma responses or activate trauma responses, because it's like your environment is constantly in flux. Your environment is constantly changing. And as a result of that too, like not only is your child changing, but you then are having to adapt and change. Like how I have to parent my 8-year-old is very different than how I had to parent her when she was 2 years old, right? Like I've had to adapt and change as a mom, and yet there wasn't a lot of acknowledging of that in myself. Like I wasn't acknowledging that of like, okay, now she's at a different stage. So now I'm having to parent differently. This takes a toll. Like there's no way that this doesn't take a toll. And I was so appreciative of my friend acknowledging it and really bringing it forward in this conversation together. And it really had me then thinking, like, of course, because then I'm like, okay, well, what do we do about that? Like, if I know that it's contributing to burnout, if I know it's going to contribute to anxiety, if I know it's going to trigger, it can activate some trauma responses, like, what do we do? And I realized, I think that's probably why I really acknowledge rituals. Like, if you know my work, you know that I love the practice of rituals to acknowledge to not only offer nervous system regulation, but also to acknowledge transitions in our life. And so it made me think, okay, one, how do we put in more practices for moms? How do we put in more practices for ourselves that as our children grow, we also acknowledge that we're growing as moms? And I think that that's a awareness of the transition, right? So if your child starts, I'm just going to use a really simple one, like they start from crawling to walking, not only celebrating them, but being like, okay, now this is a transition for me as a mom. I'm going to have to change in my mothering because I'm going to have to change in my hypervigilance because we know this. I have to change in my hypervigilance. I have to start thinking about how they're going to move around the house differently. I have to start thinking about their safety differently. I am going to have to operate differently. Here's a really intentional shift now that I'm going to have to take. And this is with everything. This is when my kids start having access to devices. This is when my kids started swimming without, started swimming freely. This is when your kid starts driving. Like there's all of these things that we can be intentional with also in transitioning ourselves. I think then too, it's how do we acknowledge the transition it kind of came up with this prompt for myself of like, what is one transition in motherhood what is one transition in motherhood I'm experiencing right now? What am I enjoying about that? And what is difficult for me? So that it gives me just a prompt to be like, okay, where are we at? Like my eldest is definitely in a stage of more independence, I want to say. Like I can really see her going into like some preteen kind of feelings, and stuff like that. And that's a change in my relationship with her. And while it's beautiful, what I love about that is I love like seeing her blossom. I love seeing her confidence. I love seeing how she's navigating like different relationships in her body and friendships and things like that, right? I also though am like, ooh, there are things that are hard for me as a mom and things that are activating for me, and I have to find a lot of patience around. And so there are parts that are difficult for me as well. And I think that if we can do more for ourselves as mothers in acknowledging these multitude of transitions that we go through in our own motherhood journey, along with our children through their childhood, I really think it can help us in reducing overwhelm. I really think it can help us in honoring ourselves as mothers. And I actually think that it can increase the joy and the satisfaction in motherhood, giving us purpose, giving us like meaning around what is this experience of motherhood that we are having. So I leave you with that as your own kind of exercise for yourself of like, what transitions are you in right now in motherhood and what parts are you enjoying and what parts are challenging for you? If you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe. I try and upload videos every single week, so I hope to see you again. Take care.